Welcome to Right versus Left News, your daily briefing on the stories that matter, told from both sides of the aisle. I'm your AI host, Chris, and each day I bring you the most important political and cultural news, with perspectives from conservative and progressive voices. No spin, no agenda, just the facts and the opinions that shape our national conversation. Let's dive in. Here's a quick overview. The White House is convening a Board of Peace meeting in Washington on February 19th to push the next phase of Gaza's ceasefire and reconstruction. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the US has set a June deadline for a peace agreement with Russia, with Miami floated for the next round of talks. Wall Street milestone. The Dow closed above 50,000 for the first time. An Arizona judge struck down several older abortion restrictions that conflict with the state's 2024 voter-approved constitutional amendment. And thousands of young workers and unions are rallying in the nation's capital today for higher wages, housing, and changes to labor law. Before we jump into today's stories, a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Family GPT, the AI chat platform actually designed for kids. If your children are curious about ChatGPT but you're worried about what they might see, Family GPT gives you full parental controls, content filtering, and the ability to align responses with your family's values. Whether Christian, Muslim, Jewish, secular, and many more. Monitor every conversation, set usage limits, and let your kids explore AI safely. No ads, no data selling, complete privacy. Sign up free at familygpt.chat.
Thanks to our sponsors for supporting Right versus Left News. Now, let's get to the headlines. Let's start in Gaza. The White House will host a Board of Peace meeting in D.C. on February 19th to coordinate reconstruction and the second phase of the ceasefire. U.S. officials say the board includes 27 countries with backing from the UN Security Council. It's also timed around a meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu on February 18th, and Israel's leader remains skeptical of parts of the plan. The roadmap comes in three phases: hostage releases, disarmament mechanisms, and a technocratic committee to manage services. Observers say disarmament details are still hazy, and that clarity will be critical for money and legitimacy to flow. On the right, the argument is straightforward. Reconstruction won't attract serious funding unless Hamas is verifiably disarmed. Conservative voices emphasize conditioning aid on demilitarization and being ready to walk away if Hamas stonewalls. On the left, there is cautious optimism about technocratic steps, but concern over governance, funding, and accountability. Progressive advocates highlight alleged ceasefire violations and insist any plan must prioritize humanitarian access and Gazan self-governance to avoid repeating past failures. Now to Ukraine. President Zelensky says the US has asked Ukraine and Russia to reach an agreement by June. Recent talks have included trilateral meetings in Abu Dhabi, and the US has proposed hosting the next round in Miami. There's been discussion of a ceasefire focused on energy infrastructure, even as Russia launched one of its most intense barrages in months. On the right, some see a time-bound deal as pragmatic, ending a grinding war while anchoring Kyiv in the west with strong, NATO-like security guarantees and pushing Europe to shoulder more costs. Deadlines, they argue, can focus minds and use sanctions or arms terms to press Moscow. On the left, critics warn that an arbitrary deadline could pressure Kyiv into painful concessions while missiles are still falling. They argue any agreement must protect Ukrainian sovereignty and avoid a ceasefire that simply freezes injustice, and they question whether parallel US-Russia economic talks distort leverage or transparency. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones closed above 50,000 for the first time, ending the day just over that mark after a rally of about 2.5%. Chipmakers and financials led the surge, capping a volatile week, even as some big tech names were mixed. Amazon slipped on massive AI-related capital spending plans. The milestone carries symbolism, and it reflects a rotation toward blue chips. Conservative leaning takes frame Dow 50,000 as a vote of confidence in U.S. dynamism and pro-growth policy, with an emphasis on tax and regulatory certainty over industrial policy. From the left, commentators note that record highs don't erase concerns about inequality, market concentration, or AI-fueled volatility. They point to Amazon's drop on eye-popping capital spending as a cautionary sign, and remind us that stock records don't always reflect how non-investors feel about prices or wages. We'll be right back with more of today's news after this brief message.
This episode is brought to you by Family GPT, the AI chat platform actually designed for kids. If your children are curious about ChatGPT but you're worried about what they might see, Family GPT gives you full parental controls, content filtering, and the ability to align responses with your family's values, whether Christian, Muslim, Jewish, secular, and many more. Monitor every conversation, set usage limits, and let your kids explore AI safely. No ads, no data selling, complete privacy. Sign up free at Family GP Chat.
Thanks again to our sponsors. Now back to the news. To Arizona, a Maricopa County judge ordered the state to stop enforcing older abortion restrictions that conflict with the 2024 constitutional amendment guaranteeing a fundamental right to abortion before viability. Blocked rules include requirements for 2 in-person visits and a 24-hour wait, telehealth and mail restrictions on abortion pills, and certain limits tied to fetal abnormalities. Republican legislative leaders say they plan to appeal. On the right, opponents argue the voter-approved amendment is far more sweeping than advertised, eliminating what they call common-sense health safeguards and opening the door to expansive late-term exceptions. They're gearing up to pursue new limits and ballot countermeasures. On the left, civil liberties and reproductive rights groups hail the ruling as carrying out voters' will by striking down medically unnecessary hurdles, especially for rural patients who rely on telehealth. Next steps focus on implementation and defending access against new workarounds. And in Washington, D.C., the Young Worker, March on Washington is mobilizing with AFL-CIO affiliates and partner groups calling for a federal living wage, affordable housing and childcare, student debt relief, and passage of the PRO Act. Organizers plan to step off late morning and rally at the Capitol around noon. Right-leaning policy groups warn that a higher federal wage floor and the PRO Act would raise costs, curb flexible work, and give unions too much power, from card check to limits on independent contracting. They argue pro-growth tax, permitting, and skills reforms would do more for young workers. Labor advocates counter that higher union density lifts wages and reduces inequality, and that stronger penalties for union busting, first contract arbitration, and gains in housing and childcare are essential to real affordability. Organizers frame today's march as building a broad, youth-led coalition for economic security. Quick recap. Washington is preparing a Gaza reconstruction summit. The US set a June timeline for a Ukraine deal. The Dow finally cleared 50,000. An Arizona court aligned abortion law with the 2024 amendment, and young workers took to D.C. streets over wages, housing, and labor rights. We'll keep watching how these stories evolve into the week ahead. That's it for today's episode of Right versus Left News. Remember, understanding both sides isn't about picking a team, it's about being informed. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and join us tomorrow for another balanced look at the day's biggest stories. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.